Lesson 10-4, Radical Equations. In this video, you will learn to solve radical equations and then solve radical equations with extraneous solutions. Vocabulary for this section includes radical equations, extraneous solutions, and that's that. Okay, so first thing we want to look at in this video is the power property of equality. So, if you square both sides of a true equation, the resulting equation is still true. So, if I have A equals B and then I square both sides, then it's going to be true at the end. So, for example, if I have the square root of x equals 4 and I square both sides, this square root and square cancel each other out, and I'm just going to get x equals 16. Which is true because if I put 16 in for x here, the square root of 16 is 4. So we could do that. So if we want to solve an equation where we have a square root, we're going to end up in one step, squaring both sides. So let's do this example. An object is dropped from an unknown height and reaches the ground in 5 seconds. Use the equation t equals the square root of h over 4, where h is time in seconds and h is height in feet, to find the height from which the object was dropped. Okay, so it reaches the ground in 5 seconds. So they say the amount of time is t. So we're going to put in 5 for t in this equation here. So I'm going to have 5 equals the square root of h equals 4. So when I'm solving these, the first thing I want to do is get the square root by itself. So I'm dividing the square root of h by 4. So the opposite of dividing by 4 is to multiply by 4. So I'm going to multiply both sides of my equation by 4. So I'm going to get 20 equals the square root of h, because those 4's cancel each other out. You have one in the denominator, one in the numerator. So now I have the square root by itself. So what I want to do is get rid of the square root. And this is where squaring both sides of the equation comes in. So I can square this side, and I can square this side. So 20 times 20 is 400. Right, that's 20 squared. And the square root of h squared is just h. So the height from which the object was dropped was at 400 feet above the ground. Okay. You guys try and solve this one. Okay, example 2, an expression as a radicand. So what happens if I have more than just a single variable inside the expression? Well, the first step, I still want to get the square root part by itself. So I want to get this whole part here alone. So first thing I want to get rid of is that plus 8. So I'm going to adding 8, which is subtracting 8. And I'm going to do that to both sides in order to keep the equation balanced. So when I do that, I get the square root of x minus 3 equals 15 minus 8 is 7. So now I want to get rid of this square root. That's the next step, because I can't move that 3 because it's inside the square root. So my next step is to get rid of the square root by squaring both sides of my equation. So the square radicand, the part inside. So it's going to become x minus 3. And over here, 7 squared is 49. So solving for x, this is just regular algebra. I'm going to add 3 now to both sides. And I get x equals 52. Okay, you guys try this one. Okay, what happens if I have a variable on both sides? So if this is the case, get rid of the square root, because we don't know how to work with that. So the square root is by itself, so now that it's by itself, I'm going to square both sides of my equation. So this becomes 2 minus y equals y squared. Now this should look familiar. This should look like quadratic, where we have a square term, an x to the power of 1 term, and a constant. So when we had those, what we always wanted to do was get the variables all on one side. So I'm going to add y to both sides, and I'm going to subtract 2 to both sides. So when I do that, over here, the 2's cancels, and the y's cancel, and I get, and on the other side, I get y squared plus y minus 2. Now I can solve this by factoring. So I'm going to say this is 0 equals y minus 1 and y plus 2, right? Because I want to multiply to negative 2, so negative 1 times 2 is negative 2, and I want to add to 1. Negative 1 plus 2 is positive 1. So remember, once you have two products, two things equal to 0, you set each one equal to 0. So this is, y minus 1 equals 0, and y plus 2 equals 0. So I get y equals 1 and y equals negative 2. Now, the tricky thing is we have to think if both check these and make sure they work. So if I go back to my original equation of 2 minus y square root equals y, it has to be true. So if I put in positive 1. So square root of 2 minus 1, is that equal to 1? Putting in for y, I get the square root of 1 equals 1. So square root of 1 is 1, and that's true. So this one is okay. I need to check the other one too. So I'm going to put in 2 minus a negative 2, and I want to know if that's negative 2, putting it in for y. So 2 minus a negative 2 is the square root of 4 is equal to negative 2. The square root of 4 is 2, which is not equal to negative 2. So this one does not work. The ones that don't work, we call an extraneous solution. Okay? And it's possible to get extraneous solutions when you have a variable, one inside and one outside. Okay? So anytime you have a variable in two places on both sides of the equation, you have to check your answers at the end because one of them might not be true. So in this case, so our only solution is y equals 1. Okay? You guys try this one. And that is lesson 10-4.